Welcome back, listeners, and you are in the episode 2 of Ecology Radio Podcast. And I'm Raj again with you guys today. And this episode delves into the environmental challenges stemming from human activities. So here we'll explore how our action from burning fossil fuels to generating plastic waste are impacting our planet. So a few days back, I came across an interesting fact online stating that cows require 28 times more grazing land as compared to pigs or chicken, and the cattle ranching contributes to deforestation, turning 1/5 of all pastures and ranges to desert. So anyways, I understand that everyone will be so excited to know our speaker for this episode. Well, obviously me too. So let's welcome Mr. Aidil Iman Aidid for this episode to share his knowledge and wisdom to broaden our understanding. So good day, Mr. Aidil.
Hi, Raj. It's nice to meet you, and it's a great opportunity to speak about the environment on this amazing platform.
Yeah, it's really a big pleasure for us to have you with us today. So Mr. Aidil is a young environmentalist with 6 years of experience in youth engagement, awareness building, and effective advocacy. He's also in his final year of Bachelor of Arts, International and Strategic Studies with specialization in environmental studies in University Malaya. Interestingly, Mr. Aidil's latest work experience was a youth climate champion consultant at UNICEF Malaysia, and also worked under sustainability themes at the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, RSPO, and Bank Rakyat as an intern. So we have heard about that you have some passion, so we get to know that you enjoy researching nature-based solutions, climate change adaptation, and biodiversity governance. So Mr. Aidil, so what are the factors that actually created a factor that created to participate in this kind of environmental activism? So is there any specific factors that really created an interest in you?
Yeah, I think I started my journey in environmentalism when I was about 19 years old. So that was like about 6 years ago. And I started it because, I was a part of this big movement in Kuala Lumpur. And this was the time when Greta Thunberg was organizing her Fridays for Future movement, when she was skipping school every Friday to protest in front of the Swedish parliament to protest against climate inaction. So that Fridays to Future movement cascaded into a whole global protest against climate inaction, and that trickled down to Malaysia as well, all the way in Kuala Lumpur. And I think in 2019 or 2018, I can't remember, but I participated in the Kuala Lumpur climate strike rally. So we walked all the way from Masjid Jamek and paraded all the way to Dataran Merdeka, protesting against transboundary haze pollution, climate injustice, and so on. So that was such a turning point in my life, where I saw a huge amount of community of Malaysians from different groups of whether they're indigenous, whether from young and old, of men and women coming together to fight against a common cause, right? And it was such a sort of like amazing experience that brought me here today, right? I participated in environmentalism because I was also exposed to different volunteering opportunities, but the sense of community that local grassroots environmentalism has in Malaysia is just an amazing space that is so it teaches you a lot. So I think I'm really grateful to be here because of all these opportunities I've had, whether through UNICEF Malaysia, whether through my own advocacy. It's because of the community itself, right? Talking to different conservationists, activists, and community leaders about the environment and having different perspectives. I think that is the ultimate factor for me.
I see. It looks like you have a really big experience on what you're doing right now. So without any delay, let's dwell into the interesting part of our podcast today. So yes, obviously the Q&A session. So Mr. Aidil, I have some exciting questions for you today in order to get to know more about the environment, and hoping our listeners get more knowledge about the environment as well. So you're excited to answer all my questions now?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, like yeah, that's a great enthusiastic. So yeah, the first question for you will be, what's one easy everyday habit that you've adopted that had surprisingly positive impact on the environment?
I wouldn't say an everyday habit, but it is something that I do weekly, which is bird watching. So I'm a bird watcher. I'm a
Yeah.
birder. I've started this hobby last year, since late last year, and it grows to become more fascinating every single trip that I take into a different natural setting to watch birds. Right. So it may not have a direct impact to the environment as terms of like reducing your greenhouse gas emissions or you're reducing your carbon footprint or
Yeah.
taking out the waste itself, but it's such an amazing experience to do as a young person and finding peace and solace
Yeah.
and community in an environment to just watch birds. So I've been a bird watcher, and one of my favorite places to bird watch is here actually in UM at Rimba Ilmu.
I see.
Such an amazing urban forest that we have here, a botanical garden that UM is so fortunate to have, and this opportunity to just walk along the pathways and see different birds, like even like the most common ones like oriental magpie robins, or called in Malay burung murai kampung,
Oh, okay.
all the way to more rarer birds like rufous banded woodpeckers. So it's such an amazing experience, and also this gratitude that I have
Yeah.
to the earth, to show these birds, these species who have developed a sense of resilience or adaptation despite all this development that's happening in the city, right? And that's
Exactly.
such a teaching moment for me. I've also been fortunate enough to do this bird watching activity with other young people as well. In fact, I think last week I brought about 25 young people alongside to do a bird watching and bird data collection activity at the Perdana Botanical Garden in Kuala Lumpur. And
I
we
see.
collected about 15 species of birds, from your oriental magpie robins all the way to birds like white-throated kingfishers, to Javan mynas. So it was such a great experience, not for me only to develop this close friendship and a sense of belonging and community with these 25 young people, but also for them to experience the same thing, because birds are, I think, the most audible wildlife in our life. It's the only animal that we hear. I mean, we don't hear tigers, we don't hear elephants in the city, we don't see them as well. But birds are the ones that we hear singing every morning, doing calls and so on. And yet, so I think what makes it more meaningful is that, when I'm attracted to a sound that a bird makes, I'm keen to find what that bird is, and hence why I've developed bird watching. And UM is a great space. Perdana Botanical Garden is a great venue as well for bird watching. The KL East Park near Taman Melawati is also an amazing location to do bird watching. But this is just something that I have recently adopted that's changed my life.
I see. Looks like you're really interested in bird watching. So yeah, from what Mr. Aidil said, I think that not only like you do something in order to save environment, but we are also obliged and responsibility to show our gratitude to Mother Nature in order to show respect to it. And yeah, obviously, I'm gonna visit Rimba Ilmu next time for bird watching as well.
I think it's such a underrated place. I've asked a lot of UM students, and they aren't even aware that Rimba Ilmu exists.
Even it's the first time for
I'm
me.
doing this shout out for Rimba Ilmu actually. This Rimba Ilmu is an amazing location under the Faculty of Science with the Institute of Biological Sciences. If you are free, just drop off at KK12, near KK12, and just go have a long walk to Rimba Ilmu.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So yeah, let's go to the second question. So who or what inspires you to be more environmental conscious, whether it's a role model, a book, a movie, or even a social media influencer? So we would love to hear that.
Well, I'm gonna as a bird watcher, I shouldn't be saying this, but to kill, what was it? To kill one bird with two stones?
Yeah.
So
two birds with one stone.
Yeah, with two birds with one stone. Not a really appropriate thing to say as a bird watcher, but I'm going to tackle the question of a book and the person as a role model. And this person wrote a book, and her name is Rachel Carson. And Rachel Carson is just has been cited as the mother of modern environmentalism. So she wrote a book called Silent Spring back in the 1960s that sort of like became a catalyst for the whole environmental movement around the world. So she wrote this really sensationalized controversial book on how the agriculture industry was polluting the environment, particularly in the United States, the use of the chemicals DDT that harmed wildlife in the US, such as the bald eagle. So what she wrote was this amazing book, and she has this really quotable sentence in the book as well, is that in nature nothing exists alone, right? And she wrote this book, and I fell in love with the book the first time I read it, and I continuously read it almost like, I think I've read it about 5 different times. But Rachel Carson is just this amazing person. She's no longer with us. She died, I think, only a few years after she released a book. And during that time, she faced so much controversy from different industrialists and from different businesses, but people cited her work as one of the most important books in history regarding the environment. And I think I look to her as this really role model that introduced me to this line of work.
I see. Then I should give it a try to read her books. And it's really inspiring that Rachel Carson is like narrowing her topics more to environment. Because as a book reader, it's very rare for me to come across books regarding environmentalism, especially. So I think I definitely should give it a try on Rachel Carson's books. So the third question will be, how can innovation or technology help us mitigate the negative impacts on human activity on the environment?
And I think when we're talking about innovation, I think a lot of it requires us looking back, right? Looking back onto, or looking into existing solutions that are there, that are tangible, that are good enough. And I think that's why when you mentioned my sort of biography, someone who advocates for nature-based solutions, I continuously advocate for that as innovation. It's this tool that we have, that we don't necessarily need to develop, that we don't necessarily need to innovate or throw in technological advancement, is it? Because nature itself is a healing part of our world, right? So nature-based solutions include things like as simple as protecting a forest reserve. Or protecting protected areas, right? You have protected areas like Taman Negara in Pahang, Terengganu, Kelantan, and Pulau Pinang, right? So those are protected areas, right? Keeping them protected is a nature-based solution, right? And one of the most simple nature-based solution, I think, is tree planting, right? And I think that is an initiative that a lot of people enjoy. It brings so much meaning into their experience when they're actually planting a tree and letting it grow and see how it grows. So tree planting or afforestation is one nature-based solution. There are other nature-based solutions, protecting marine protected areas like coral reefs, ensuring mangroves stay protected, using nature as a tool to fight against different environmental issues like climate change, right? Or climate change related effects like flooding, right? So we know the fact that ecosystems like mangroves or coral reefs protect communities from flooding, from tsunamis. They act as a natural barrier against these environmental risks. So I think the innovation that I would always advocate for and that I would like to see mainstream into Malaysia's policies and legislation is definitely more of nature-based solutions. We are a country that is so blessed with so much biodiversity. We are, we have so much potential to tap into nature, right? And if we give nature a chance as an ally to protect, especially urban areas like Kuala Lumpur that's facing a lot of floods recently, it'd be really great, right? To ensure that green spaces do not get developed, that children, young people, and people from different generations and different backgrounds can access to parks, public spaces, green spaces, to enjoy nature, biodiversity, but also to allow those green spaces as places that can retain flood water, right? The concept of a sponge city. A sponge city is basically a city that's naturally built to absorb all that flood water through vegetation, through lakes, through ponds, through biodiversity. So I think I'm a huge advocate for that, and I think we need to mainstream it and see it as this huge potential for climate change mitigation and
I see.
adaptation as well. It's getting a lot hotter nowadays in Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah, true.
And we see a lot of trees in UM as well falling down, and
Yes.
cities in Kuala Lumpur falling down as well. And that's because those trees are not native to Malaysia. They're ornamental trees brought in from other countries. So experts are calling that if we want to plant trees in our cities, they need to be from our own forests, right? Because they have the ecological system to become resilient against flooding, storms, and the soil issues that we have, right? So if we stopped, I'm not saying we need to completely stop, but if we try to capitalize on natural native trees as a part of our tree planting efforts in the city, to decorate the city, to make it more nice and more cooler, I think that would be beneficial as well, and there'd be lesser cases of trees falling down, because it's such an unfortunate thing to see these old trees falling down and destroying cars and unfortunately have killed a few people. So we need to capitalize on nature-based solutions here, and if it's native, if it's indigenous, if it's local, the best way for us to put it forward.
Yeah, that's really great ideas from you, Mr. Aidil. So yeah, I think that nature-based solutions are great solutions for us to adapt, instead of we are creating a new technology in order to preserve the nature, because like how you mentioned just now, ecosystem could heal itself. It's just a process. It's a cycle,
yes,
right?
exactly.
So like how you mentioned just now, the sponge city. So it sounds really interesting. Is there any country that really applied this thing in their country that it actually worked?
Yeah, I believe Thailand, I think Chulalongkorn University Park.
Oh, okay.
I believe the University of Chulalongkorn, they have this amazing park. I've been there once. I had to go there because I wanted to see how they would implement it as a sponge park, right? So it's this concept of a sponge park. It absorbs the flood water in Bangkok, right? There are other few examples in China, I believe. Singapore is also, I think, when it comes to having public spaces for parks and green spaces, they're quite ahead of that, right? Because they're such a small country, but also very reliant on public transport and low dependence on car mobility, more on like walking, more to like using MRT and stuff, right? And also, so they have a lot of parks, and they would have to as a metropolitan island. So those also act as like flood retention. Sort of like sponge city concept, right?
Oh, okay.
But Chulalongkorn University Park is one example. We do have not sponge cities, but we do have flood retention ponds in Kuala Lumpur or in Malaysia. They're just basically just kolam or like a pond that absorbs all the flood water. But what we need is the same concept that Chulalongkorn University Park has, and how Singapore ensures that their green spaces are protected and are accessible, and also benefits the urban biodiversity there.
Oh, I see. That's really interesting that you really know the concept of it like really, really well and really deep, right? So, all right. So, you ready for the next question?
Yes, of course. Yes.
All right. So, how important do you think that environment education is for the future generations?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think we have to start mandating environmental education as a mandatory syllabus in school. There are like these plans, I think, to make climate change as a mandatory syllabus in primary school and secondary school. Right. Back then, when I was in primary school and secondary school, I think my exposure to climate change was through geography mainly, right? But it also covers only the basics like greenhouse gas emissions. But I wasn't exposed to like what kind of activities were the ones that causing climate change, like deforestation, fossil fuel emissions, right? So I think it would be really great to build an education system that is climate smart. So a climate smart education system is ensuring that it's a mandated thing in schools. But I want to move forward from just reading and doing exercises on climate change in school. A climate smart education means a university or a school is safe enough to learn about the environment, meaning that infrastructure is resilient to the challenges of climate change, meaning your rooftops don't get destroyed after a heavy storm, right?
Oh, okay.
So we've seen this in a lot of universities and schools where they get flooded, where their rooftops get flown and thrown away from heavy storms, that they are not in terms of infrastructure, are not built to become resilient to climate change. So education not only needs to focus on the syllabus, but it also needs to focus on making sure that places like University Malaya, schools, anywhere is a learning institution, is safe for them to go to learn. It means that there is, the infrastructure is resilient to climate change. The water availability is all the time. Electrification is important as well. And the amount of trees in universities and schools as well provides that kind of benefit. So climate smart education or environmental education is not just about opening a book and learning about climate change.
Exactly.
It's also about the things around you reflect what you learn in a book.
It's like how you're saying, it's like it's not like just you're studying things theoretically, but you have to make things more practical. We have to practice it more.
Practice it as well, and you would see it, right? If you go to school, and I think it's my firm belief that everyone should go to school that is a safe space for them.
Exactly.
That's really important.
Yeah, I think that we are not supposed to just read and go through articles or newspapers, just reading the environmental issues in order for us to get awareness or realizations on environmental issues. But instead, we have to take the responsibility and we must take the commitment in order to take actions and apply our knowledge in order to save the environment as well.
Right.
So let's go to the fifth question. So what are the most significant challenges faced by governments and international organizations in implementing effective policies and regulations to address environmental issues such as climate change, deforestation, or pollutions?
Yeah, and I think one of the problems is sitting in this room, people like me who are always angry against multinational corporations, against government inaction, and I think that's a challenge, right? For governments to, let's say, the Ministry of Environment has to appease both the corporations and the civil society and the public, right? How can they mediate three different actors to pursue the same goal, right? Because maybe an MNC has a different goal when it comes to climate change mitigation, right? Maybe they don't want to let go of fossil fuel combustion, but the civil society and the public want to focus on solar energy and hydropower and other forms of renewable energy. So it's really hard to mediate the interests of different groups of people. And I acknowledge that. But I think the government has a very important role to listen to all sides, but also to see, which side isn't going to cost the planet, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which isn't going to cost the future as well. And I think that's really important to attentively listen into interests from the people, and especially in civil societies. You have your priorities with some companies, of course, but those are business priorities, and there won't be any business on a dead planet, right? It won't be any business on in a place that is being submerged by rising sea levels, right? So looking into the interests of the people is really important, and those challenges are something that they would face. And another challenge is fragmentation of governance, right? You have different government bodies, like ministries, who tackle different things, right?
Yes, exactly.
Nowadays, the Ministry of Energy has been split from the Ministry of Environment, right? It's two different ministries now. And then you have, as a law student, you also know that land and natural resources, not under the federal government, it's under the state government jurisdiction. So forests, water, minerals are all under the jurisdiction of state governments. So having to mediate or to centralize all that is very difficult. So decentralization of government is a problem. And I think if you have one avenue that brings all different government bodies together, whether state government or federal government, that'd be great. And I think that applies for different things as well. It can be really confusing for a lot of of the public members. For example, like land and natural resource ecosystems, right? Forests are all under state governments, but wildlife is under Pihilitan, right? Which is a federal agency.
Federal
Yeah.
agency.
So it's difficult to sort of like centralize that. I can imagine how hard it is for the government, but also for the public, they
Yeah.
might not be aware of such governance
Yes.
systems. Yeah.
So I think that the difficult part of the government body is to mediate the all perspective of people, like,
Yeah.
and usually like it happens to be solely focusing on corporate companies. So I do also think that the power separation is the biggest challenge that government facing in order to save the environment and to create a environment eco-friendly system in our country. Like for example, like there is a state government and central government with different opinion. And I also recently came across with an article that explains that indigenous people's land rights have been seized because of the state government would like to develop modern
their land,
to become a modern land.
Yeah.
While the federal government is like focusing on the rights of the indigenous people. So it actually creates a dispute between the state government and central government. So the biggest challenge here the government faces is the power separation, I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have came to the last question for our podcast. So the last question will be, how can business and industries balance the pursuit of economic growth with environmental sustainability?
Yeah. Oh, and that's, how can they pursue their own sort of like business priorities, but also ensure that the environment is safeguarded and protected and so on. So I think the concept of a just transition is really important. And I think that's also what Malaysia is prioritizing. So the concept of a just transition is that we as a country should move towards renewable sources of energy, whether at a large scale, but through an equitable manner. So this means that we don't leave behind engineers who used to work in oil and gas and just leave them behind and say, we're not hiring any oil and gas engineers anymore because everyone's just focusing on solar and hydro right now. So we don't really need oil and gas experts.
Yeah.
So ensuring that oil and gas workers can transition towards cleaner energy is really important. Whether you're doing workshops or upscaling programs, capacity building for them to adapt in solar engineering or in hydro power, hydroelectric dams and so on is really important.
Yeah.
And I think Malaysia wants to focus on that, on a just transition. But also it looks into how the Malaysian government or how different corporations, governments, or people itself who are interested in just transition is able to secure that kind of funding, right?
Yeah.
So Malaysia is a huge advocate for getting funds from wealthier countries to finance climate mitigation efforts, whether it's through our road to transitioning into a cleaner energy or through adapting to climate change. So when at COP28 in Dubai last year, the Ministry of Environment and the Malaysian government was really pressing on securing the loss and damage funding, but also on just transition. So I think that's how we can sort of like balance it. I think we ensure that people don't get left behind in pursuit of environmental protection. We ensure that when we approach environmentalism in a holistic manner and that it is sustainable enough for everyone to take part of it, right? And I think that's really important. So I think growing beyond that, there is a huge opportunity for young people from different academic backgrounds to be interested in sustainability as well. So if you are someone from law, if you are someone from mass communications or from different other academic studies, it doesn't matter. You can still work in sustainability. Like we need environmental lawyers, we need environmental journalists, we need people to design infographics or posters on environmental awareness. So that is also an important pathway that young people need to consider. And I think governments, corporations have this responsibility to develop capacity building programs to say that we have a capacity building program if you're interested in working for water and sanitation, if you're interested in working in building solar panels, if you're interested in working for agribusinesses, right? So creating more jobs of sustainability for young people is really important. I went to the internship fair and a lot of career fairs in and there were not many opportunities for sustainability. So creating more of that for young people is going to be really important and really beneficial.
So yeah, I think that sustainability plays an important role. That it's not only like a body or an organization plays a role, but it's about each and every individuals how they get the interest in order to protect the environment, and in order to make the explanation that you've mentioned just now to make it more practical. So yeah, we have came to the end part of our podcast today. So yeah, this episode doesn't just highlight on the problems in environment, but we also came across and explored the solution for it as well. And so let's practice and learn about ways we could reduce the environmental impacts and make a positive difference for our planet. So always remember, Mother Nature matters. Thank you, dear listeners, and meet you guys on the next episode of Ecology Radio.